Why was she the only one still standing when the briefing ended? The room emptied, boots scuffing against concrete, chairs screeching back into place, voices fading into echoes, but she remained, alone. Her hand rested on the cold steel table, fingertips tracing a crack etched long ago. The others didn't notice her silence, or maybe they chose not to. She had grown used to that, being the quiet shadow in the back of every room, the one who absorbed everything and said nothing. But this time there was something she hadn't told them, not yet. The fluorescent light above flickered, buzzing in rhythm with her pulse. She drew a slow breath, steadying her thoughts. Beyond those thick walls lay a horizon that burned, not with sunlight but with fire. Entire villages reduced to embers, screams carried by the wind. The mission was simple on paper: insertion, neutralization, extraction. Yet beneath every word, between every tactical line, lived a weight that only she carried. A personal reason, a buried truth. Her silhouette, they once said, was unmistakable. A lean frame, straight posture, jaw set like stone. She looked like someone born for war. But they were wrong. She hadn't been born for this. She had been shaped by it, forged by losses that left scars invisible under her uniform. She tightened her gloves. She could still hear her brother's voice, faint, almost drowned out by memory. He had walked into a mission like this years ago. He never walked out. That silence had followed her, haunted her, drove her every time she picked up a rifle, every time she climbed into a cockpit, every time she steadied her aim. She had promised herself she wouldn't end the same way. But promises were fragile things in places like this. A knock jolted her back. Sergeant Malik leaned in, his weathered face lined with exhaustion. "You're still here," he said softly. Not a question, a statement. She nodded but didn't answer. He stepped inside, lowering his voice. "You don't have to carry all of it alone, you know." Her eyes flicked toward him, unreadable. For a moment his presence cracked the stillness. Malik wasn't like the others. He had seen things too, things that etched into him the same quiet heaviness she wore. He was one of the few who understood silence better than words. But she didn't respond. Instead, she reached for the mission folder and slid it into her pack. He exhaled, almost defeated, and left her to her thoughts. That night the base was alive with motion. Helicopters thumped against the night sky, their rotors chopping through the thick, humid air. Engines roared, metal clanged, radios hissed with coded chatter. And yet, beneath all that noise, she felt an odd stillness inside her. As she approached the hangar, she caught fragments of laughter. The squad huddled near their gear, trading jokes and nervous banter. She envied them sometimes, their ability to mask fear with humor, to bleed tension into words. She couldn't. Her fear lived quietly, like a shadow stitched into her skin. "Hey," one of the younger soldiers called out. Ortiz, barely 23, still with eyes too bright for this war. "You good, ma'am?" She gave the smallest nod. He grinned nervously, rubbing the back of his neck. "You'll cover us from above, right, like last time?" Her lips twitched into something almost like a smile. Like last time. He didn't know that last time she had nearly broken. That pulling the trigger, watching life end through the scope, had left her shaking when no one was looking. Ortiz didn't need to know. None of them did. As the team loaded into the transport, she peeled away, heading for her station. Tonight she wouldn't be on the ground with them. Not yet. Her role was the eye above, the watcher, the protector, the one who carried their fates in the crosshairs of her rifle. The chopper door slammed shut. Dust swirled, blinding for a second. Engines roared, lifting them into the night. She stood there, watching them disappear into the horizon's fire, alone again. Minutes later she was in position, high ground, scope ready, breath steady. The headset crackled in her ear, Malik's voice. "Eyes open, they'll need you." She whispered back, "Copy." And then silence, just her heartbeat, the wind brushing against her cheek, the faint creak of her rifle pressed firm into her shoulder. Through the scope the world transformed. Every flicker of movement sharpened. Every shadow stretched long. She followed the squad's advance, distant figures moving between ruins and burning husks of buildings. The city below looked like the aftermath of a storm, walls collapsed, windows shattered, streets broken and bleeding. Her finger hovered near the trigger. She scanned rooftops, alleys, corners where death might hide. Each time she thought she saw something, her chest tightened. But hesitation could kill them, so she forced her breath slow, her hands steady. Minutes bled into hours. They pushed deeper. The radio cracked with updates, whispers, commands. She kept watch, her eyes never leaving the scope. But then, movement. A figure appeared in her sightlane, too still, too deliberate. Perched with a weapon, she froze, time slowed. She exhaled, lined the shot, squeezed. The rifle barked, sharp and final. The figure dropped. Her squad moved safely past, unaware of the shadow that nearly ended them. Ortiz's voice crackled over comms, light, joking about something she didn't catch. They laughed. She didn't. Because she knew what Ortiz didn't. The one she shot hadn't been much older than him. Her chest tightened. She tried to shake it. This was the job. This was survival. Yet some part of her whispered that she was crossing invisible lines, losing pieces of herself she'd never get back. Hours later, when the extraction point drew near, Malik's voice came back. Calm, even. You did good, we're clear. But her hands trembled as she lowered the rifle. The mission was clean. Lives saved. No losses. They would call it a success. So why did it feel like failure? She sat there, the barrel cooling, the silence growing heavier. In the glow of distant fires, her silhouette stretched long across the ruins. Alone. A figure carrying not just her weapon, not just her orders, but something deeper, something heavier. She whispered to herself, so faint no one could hear. I promised you I'd finish what you started. But the night swallowed her words. And as the horizon flickered with fire, she knew this was only the beginning. What did they see in her when she walked back into the hangar? The team was already unloading, their laughter louder now, adrenaline spilling into jokes and half-told stories. Dust clung to their uniforms, sweat glistened on their brows, but relief softened their eyes. They had made it out, whole, breathing, alive. And yet, when her boots echoed on the concrete floor, the air shifted. Their voices dipped for a heartbeat, as though something about her presence unsettled the fragile ease of survival. Maybe they sensed it, the shadow she carried, the weight she wouldn't name. Ortiz caught her gaze and lifted a thumb, grinning like a boy who'd outrun death. Knew you'd have us covered. She forced the smallest nod, but her eyes slid past him. Because when she looked at him, she didn't just see Ortiz. She saw the boy through her scope, the one she had silenced before he could silence them. And for a moment, she wondered, how many more faces would she have to carry before the end? The debrief was short, too short. Success stamped in bold letters, losses marked at 0. Clean, efficient. On paper, it was everything command wanted. But papers never smelled of smoke, never echoed with screams, never carried the memory of eyes staring back at you in that last, irreversible second. When it ended, she lingered again, alone again. Malik found her at the corner of the hall, helmet tucked under his arm. He studied her quietly. He had learned not to push, not to fill silence with words it couldn't hold. Still, after a long pause, he said, "You don't look at missions the way the others do." She tilted her head slightly, wary. They see victories, numbers, objectives ticked off. You see something else, something they don't. Her lips parted, but no words came. She wanted to tell him, about her brother, about the promise, about the way every shot she took carved deeper into her. But saying it aloud would make it real, and real was harder to carry. So she just said, I see what's there. He nodded slowly. That's the hardest part. That night when the base finally slept, she lay awake staring at the ceiling. Her bunk creaked under her stillness. Around her, soldiers dreamed uneasy dreams. She listened to the rhythm of their breaths, the occasional murmur, the restless turning. Her own mind refused rest. Every time she closed her eyes, the scope returned. The boy's face blurred and sharpened. Her finger froze on the trigger again. and she whispered the same words over and over. You didn't have a choice. You didn't have a choice. But deep down, she knew she always had a choice. That was the curse. Somewhere faintly, she remembered her brother's voice. He used to say war didn't steal your soul in one blow. It took it piece by piece, so slowly you didn't notice until nothing was left. She turned on her side, eyes burning, and prayed the next mission wouldn't come so soon. But it did. The orders landed at dawn. She was in the briefing room again, the squad gathered tight. The map lit up under fluorescent glare, red markers bleeding across enemy lines. Tonight would be harder, deeper, riskier. The commanding officer's voice was steady, clinical. You'll insert here, secure the target, extract, expect heavy resistance. Her hand tightened around her pen, though she wasn't writing. Resistance, a sterile word for chaos, for ambush, for death. As the squad leaned forward, trading questions, she caught herself scanning their faces. Ortiz, eager but too young. Malik, steady, hiding the ghosts behind his eyes. Chen, the medic, fidgeting with his gloves, whispering prayers she couldn't hear. Each one human, each one with something waiting for them back home. And she wondered, which of these faces would she still see tomorrow? Her chest tightened with a weight she couldn't shake. She wanted to scream that they weren't ready, that none of them really were. But instead, she sat in silence, her shadow blending with the hum of the projector. When the briefing ended, Ortiz tapped her shoulder. Hey, you'll be with us this time, right? Not just above. She hesitated. For a heartbeat, her silence stretched too long. Then she forced the words, yes, with you. His grin widened. Good, feels safer when you're there. The innocence in his voice cut deeper than any bullet. Hours later, they moved. The night swallowed them whole, a convoy threading through broken streets, engines rumbling low, headlights dimmed. Every corner felt like an ambush. Every shadow stretched too far. The city breathed like a wounded beast, smoke rising from collapsed buildings, windows gaping like broken teeth. She moved with the squad, weapon firm against her shoulder, eyes scanning, heart steady but heavy. Each step crunched against rubble, too loud in the silence. Malik's voice came low over comms. Eyes open, stay sharp. They reached the entry point, a shattered archway leading into darkness. The squad filed in, rifles raised, boots careful. She followed, her senses heightened, breath shallow. The air smelled of ash, of damp stone, of something metallic she didn't want to name. Inside, the silence pressed harder. Her pulse quickened. She couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. And then a sound, faint, a shuffle against stone. Her rifle snapped up, eyes locking onto a figure half hidden in the shadows. Small, too small. Her breath caught. A child. The boy's face streaked with dirt, wide eyes glinting in the dim light. He froze at the sight of rifles aimed his way, hands trembling. A bundle clutched tight against his chest. Ortiz cursed under his breath. What the hell? Malik raised a hand. Hold fire. The squad hesitated, tension stretched to a breaking point. Her rifle didn't lower. She couldn't. Every instinct screamed trap. She had seen it before, children used as bait, as shields, as weapons. But then the boy's hand shook and the bundle loosened. A tattered cloth slipped, revealing nothing but a cracked doll inside. Her chest constricted. Chen moved forward slowly, kneeling. Hey, it's okay, you're safe. His voice softened, breaking through the tension. The boy blinked, then bolted past them, vanishing into the dark before anyone could stop him. The squad exhaled as one, the air finally moving again. Ortiz muttered, voice shaking, Kid almost got me killed. But her rifle was still raised. Her heart hammered, because for one terrifying second she had been ready to pull the trigger. And she knew, had the doll been something else, had the boy moved differently, she would have. Her hands trembled as she lowered her weapon. The mission pressed on, corridors winding deeper, shadows shifting. But her mind stayed behind with the boy's eyes, the doll's cracked face, the trembling hands. Every step after felt heavier. Every corner whispered questions she couldn't answer. When they finally reached the target room, Malik gave the signal. The breach was fast, loud, brutal. Shouts erupted, gunfire flared, smoke filled the air. She moved on instinct, clearing angles, firing when she had to, pulling Ortiz out of the line of fire when he stumbled. Her body acted like a machine, but inside she was anything but. By the time the dust settled, the room was theirs, the target secured, another victory stamped on paper. But as they regrouped, Ortiz slapped her shoulder, laughing breathlessly. "See, safer with you here." She nodded, forcing steady breath, hiding the storm inside. Because all she could see was the boy's face. And all she could hear was her brother's voice, piece by piece. That night when the squad slept, she sat alone by the ruins, the firelight flickering across her silhouette. A lone figure carrying the weight of destiny. And she whispered to the silence, "How much of me will be left when this is over?" Why did silence always feel louder after the mission ended? The others slept. Their breaths rose and fell in uneven rhythm, some whispering fragments of dreams they'd never admit to in daylight. The small fire they'd built flickered low, its glow painting tired faces with fragile warmth. She sat apart as always, rifle balanced across her knees, eyes fixed on the horizon where night still clung stubbornly to the earth. Sleep never came easy. Not anymore. Every time her eyes closed, the boy returned, the dirt-streaked face, the trembling hands, the cracked doll, and behind him always the faceless shadows she had ended through her scope. Her chest tightened. She pressed her palm against her ribs as though she could quiet the ache from within. She wanted to believe what command said, that they were liberators, protectors, the thin line standing between chaos and order. But the line blurred more with every mission. Each choice pulled at something human in her, something fragile she fought to keep alive. The wind shifted, a faint whistle through the ruins. She raised her eyes, scanning instinctively. Nothing moved, just shadows and silence. Still, her grip on the rifle tightened. Because silence was rarely safe. She thought of Malik then, his steady presence, the way he seemed to read her without asking. He carried his own ghosts, she knew. Everyone here did. But he bore them differently, like weights he had accepted rather than fought. She wondered if she would ever reach that place, or if the war would consume her before she did. A crunch of gravel broke her thoughts. She turned. Malik approached, slow and deliberate, hands empty. He stopped a few feet away, giving her space, then lowered himself onto a broken stone beside her. "Can't sleep." She shook her head. "Me neither," he said with a faint smile. "Haven't in years." For a long moment they just sat in silence, the fire crackling softly behind them. Then he asked, "You ever wonder how long it takes before you can't tell who you are anymore?" Her throat tightened. She wanted to answer, but the words lodged like stones, so she stayed quiet. He sighed. "Back home I had a wife. Still do, technically. She sends letters, I don't answer much. What do I even say? That I'm not the man she remembers. That I don't even remember who that man was." He rubbed a hand over his face. The lines around his eyes deepened in the firelight. "Sometimes I think I'll go back and she'll look at me and she'll know. She'll see what I've done, what I've become, and she won't recognize me." His voice cracked slightly, and that, more than his words, cut into her, because she understood too well. She wanted to tell him about her brother then, about the promise that chained her to every mission, every trigger pulled. But the words refused her again, so she just said softly, "She'll still know you." Malik looked at her, something unreadable in his gaze. Then he nodded once, as though accepting an answer he didn't believe but needed. The fire cracked behind them. Somewhere in the distance a dog barked, hollow, lonely, the sound swallowed by ruins. The night stretched long. When dawn broke, it came not with light but with orders. The radio hissed, spitting static before a voice cut through. "Command, new intel, new objective, immediate movement required." The squad stirred awake, groggy, cursing under their breath, shoving on gear with tired hands. Ortiz muttered something about coffee, his voice cracking with youth and fatigue. Chen rubbed his eyes, lips moving silently in prayer. She stood, helmet snapping into place, rifle slung over her shoulder. Her body moved with precision, automatic, but inside her chest the storm raged. Another mission, another step deeper into fire. The convoy moved fast, wheels grinding against broken asphalt. Dust rose in choking clouds, engines growled. The city blurred past, shattered windows, collapsed roofs, graffiti scrawled in desperate hands. She kept her eyes on it all, cataloging details, searching for patterns in the chaos. This mission felt different, heavier. Command's voice had been clipped, urgent. Something unsaid lingered in the static. As they neared the target zone, Malik leaned forward, voice low. "Stay sharp. This isn't routine." She didn't need the warning. She could feel it in her bones. The convoy halted. They dismounted, boots sinking into dust. Ahead loomed a complex of crumbling buildings, their walls pockmarked with bullets, windows dark and watchful. The silence pressed in again, thicker than before. The squad fanned out, weapons raised. She moved with them, every nerve on edge. The air smelled of rust, oil, and the faint, sickly sweetness of decay. They breached the first building, empty, just rubble and shadows. The second the same. But in the third movement, gunfire exploded, deafening in the confined space. Shouts erupted, chaos swallowed order in an instant. She ducked behind cover, returned fire flashing from her rifle. Plaster rained from shattered walls, smoke burned her lungs. Ortiz shouted something, his voice high with panic, but the roar drowned it out. She moved on instinct, leaning out, firing, ducking back, breath coming fast. Malik's voice cut through comms, calm and firm. "Hold the line, push left." She followed, covering Ortiz as he stumbled, dragging him behind cover. His hands shook, his breath ragged. His bright eyes weren't so bright now. In the chaos, she caught sight of one enemy slipping through the smoke, weapon raised toward Chen. Without thinking, she pivoted, fired. The figure crumpled. Chen looked back, wide-eyed, nodding once in shaky gratitude. The fight dragged minutes into eternity. When silence finally fell, it came heavy, broken only by ragged breaths and the crackle of flames licking ruined walls. The squad regrouped, counting heads, all present, all alive. But Ortiz's hand still shook as he muttered, "We should have been dead in there." Malik clapped his shoulder, "But we're not." They moved deeper, securing the complex. The target was close now. Intel suggested enemy commanders hiding within. High value, high risk. As they cleared room by room, she caught glimpses of lives abandoned. A child's shoe beneath rubble. A cracked photograph on the wall, faces smiling before the storm. A journal half burned, words unreadable but desperate. Her throat tightened. Each fragment whispered that the war wasn't just theirs. It belonged to everyone trapped within it. Finally, they reached the inner chamber, doors reinforced, heavy locks. Malik signaled the breach. Charges set, countdown ticked. The blast rocked the air, dust swallowing vision, ears ringing. They stormed inside. And froze. Not commanders, not soldiers. Civilians. Dozens of them, women, old men. A few children, their faces pale with terror, eyes wide in the smoke. The squad hesitated, weapons raised but hands trembling. "What the hell?" Ortiz's voice cracked. Chen cursed under his breath, lowering his rifle. "This isn't right." Malik's jaw tightened. He spoke into comms. "Command, we have non-combatants. Repeat, non-combatants." Static, then the cold, clipped voice of command. "Confirm and clear the building." Malik's eyes darkened. "They're civilians." "Orders are orders." The line went dead. The squad looked at each other, silence thick. She felt her stomach twist. Every instinct screamed against it. These weren't threats. These were people, terrified, clutching each other in the smoke. Ortiz whispered, "We can't." But Malik raised his hand, voice low, steady. "Nobody fires." Relief flickered through the squad. She lowered her rifle, heart pounding. And then from the back of the crowd, a movement. A man stepped forward, rough clothes, dirt-streaked face, but in his hands a detonator. Her breath caught. Malik shouted, "No." Time fractured. Her rifle rose, her fingers squeezed. The shot cracked, echoing through the chamber. The man dropped, detonator clattering from his hand. The civilian screamed, chaos erupting. Her chest heaved, smoke curled around her, her hands shook against the rifle. She had saved them, saved her squad, saved everyone. But all she could see were the children's terrified eyes. And all she could hear was her brother's voice, piece by piece. That night, as the squad retreated to base, Malik sat beside her in silence. He didn't speak, didn't judge, didn't comfort. He just sat. And in the flicker of firelight, her silhouette stretched long across the ruins. A lone figure, carrying the weight of destiny. But with each mission, she wondered, how much longer could she carry it before it crushed her completely? How many times could a person pull the trigger before they stopped recognizing themselves? The question haunted her as the convoy rumbled back toward base, engines growling against the silence that weighed over them. Dust streaked their uniforms, smoke clung to their skin, and none of them spoke. Not after what they'd seen. Not after the detonator hit the ground, after the screams echoed in the chamber, after her shot rang out. Ortiz stared at his boots, lips pressed thin, hands restless in his lap. Chen clutched his med kit like a lifeline, head bowed, whispering words she couldn't catch. Malik sat upright, jaw tight, eyes fixed on the horizon as though he could will it to change. And she sat in the corner, rifle across her knees, her hands still trembling. The man's face lingered in her vision. The civilian's eyes, wide and terrified, burned behind her lids. She told herself again and again, she had saved them. She had saved everyone. But the voice inside her whispered, "You almost didn't, and next time maybe you won't." When they reached base, the debrief was as cold as the one before. Numbers tallied, threats neutralized, civilians alive. On paper, another success, another victory, another line in the ledger of survival. She walked out before it ended, unable to stand the sterile words another second. The night air hit her face, cool, sharp, almost cruel in its indifference. She pulled her helmet off, letting her hair fall damp with sweat, and leaned against the cold steel wall. Malik found her there. He didn't speak at first, just stood beside her, arms crossed, staring into the dark as if the horizon might confess answers. Finally he said, "That shot saved us." She closed her eyes. The words didn't comfort, they cut. "I didn't see the detonator," he added quietly, "not until it was too late." Her hands clenched. "I almost didn't either." "But you did." His voice was steady, meant to anchor, but she felt no anchor, just the endless drift of choices that blurred lines she couldn't redraw. She wanted to tell him about her brother then, about the last mission he went on, how the reports said he hesitated, how that hesitation cost him his life and his team. She wanted to tell Malik that every time she raised her rifle, she heard that story whisper in her ear, "Don't pause. Don't fail like he did. Don't die like he did." But the words wouldn't leave her throat. Instead, she whispered, "What if I start shooting at ghosts? What if I can't tell anymore?" Malik turned to her, his eyes steady, weary. "Then you're still human. The ones who stop asking those questions, those are the ones already gone." The words lingered, heavy but fragile. She didn't know if they comforted or cursed. That night when the base dimmed into uneasy silence, she pulled out the letter, the one she kept hidden deep in her pack. The paper worn, creased from too many folds, the ink smudged in places where her fingers pressed too long. It was her brother's last letter, the one that arrived days before news of his death. She unfolded it slowly, as though it might crumble in her hands. "Little sister," it began, the handwriting uneven but familiar, the tone casual but threaded with something unspoken. "By the time this reaches you, I'll be somewhere I can't describe. You know how it is. I just wanted to say you were always braver than me. People don't see it, but I do. You carry things quietly, stronger that way. Don't lose that." Her eyes blurred, she read on. "If I don't make it back, promise me one thing. Don't let this war take you too. Don't let it steal the parts of you that matter. Hold on to them. Hold on to you." Her hands shook as she folded the letter, pressing it to her chest. She had promised herself she would carry his mission, his unfinished fight. But she had broken the one promise he asked of her, because piece by piece, she felt herself fading. Sleep didn't come, and when dawn broke, it carried new orders. Another mission. This one was different, not a strike, not a raid, a rescue. The briefing laid it out with clinical precision. Hostages, civilians held in a fortified compound, enemy presence heavy, risks high, failure unacceptable. The squad listened, eyes narrowing, jaws tightening. Chen whispered another prayer. Ortiz fidgeted, restless but determined. Malik asked sharp questions, each one betraying the weight he carried as their anchor. She sat silent, her hand resting on the mission folder, her brother's letter hidden beneath it. This mission wasn't like the others. This one wasn't about killing. It was about saving. And yet the thought didn't ease her. It only sharpened the storm inside, because saving meant choices. Saving meant risk. Saving meant pulling the trigger before hesitation cost lives. When the briefing ended, Ortiz caught up to her in the hall. "Hey," he said, voice low, nervous but eager. You ever wonder why we do it?" She glanced at him, caught off guard. "I mean," he rubbed the back of his neck, "we call it duty, right? Or orders, but why us? Why not someone else? Why do we keep going back out there when we know what it does to us?" She wanted to answer. She wanted to say, "Because I have to, because I owe someone who never came back," but the words stuck. So she said only, "Because if not us, then who?" Ortiz nodded, but his eyes lingered on her, searching for something more. Then he gave a half-smile, fragile but real. "Guess that's enough." Hours later, they moved. The convoy approached the compound under cover of night. Engines cut. Silence fell heavy. The squad dismounted, boots crunching against gravel, breaths fogging in the cool air. The compound loomed ahead, walls scarred by years of conflict, watchtowers rising like jagged teeth. She crouched low, rifle steady, eyes scanning through her scope. Shadows moved along the perimeter, guards, restless, unaware of what crept toward them. Malik's voice came through comms. "Positions on my mark." Her heart steadied, her breath slowed. This was the moment. The thin line between hesitation and action, between saving and failing, between living and dying. Her scope locked on a guard, his weapon slung carelessly, his steps lazy. Her finger hovered. She thought of her brother, of hesitation, of cost, of silence. Malik's voice cut through. "Mark." The rifle cracked, the guard dropped. The squad surged forward, shadows moving through shadows, the night swallowing their advance. Gunfire erupted, sharp and sudden, but they pressed on, cutting through resistance with precision. Inside the compound, chaos reigned. Shouts in foreign tongues, footsteps pounding, gunfire flashing in bursts, the air thick with smoke and fear. She moved room to room, covering her squad, her eyes scanning every corner, every shadow. Her pulse pounded, but her hands stayed steady. And then voices. Small, fragile, pleading. They burst into a chamber where dozens huddled together, hostages. Faces streaked with dirt, eyes wide with terror, bodies trembling. Children clung to mothers, elders clutched each other, hope flickering faintly in their eyes. Relief surged through the squad. Chen rushed forward, checking for injuries. Ortiz's grin cracked wide, breathless with victory. Malik's shoulders eased just for a moment. But she froze. Because in the crowd, among the frightened faces, she saw him. Not her brother, but a boy who looked so much like him it broke her. Same eyes, same jaw, same fragile mix of fear and defiance. Her breath caught, her rifle dipped. For a heartbeat the chamber dissolved. She was back home, watching her brother walk away, his silhouette fading into war he'd never returned from. Her chest tightened, a sob caught in her throat. Then Malik's voice snapped her back. "We move now." The squad herded the hostages, guiding them out, covering every angle. She forced herself to move, to breathe, to focus. But inside she was shaking. Because she realized something then, something terrifying. She wasn't just carrying her brother's promise anymore. She was chasing him, chasing his ghost in every face, every shadow, every child who reminded her of what she lost. And she didn't know if chasing a ghost would save her or destroy her. That night when the hostages were safe, when the squad collapsed in exhaustion, she sat alone again. The firelight flickered, painting her silhouette long against the ruins. And she whispered to the night, "How much of me is left to give before there's nothing left at all?" His name was Elias. Older by 3 years, taller by half a head, with a laugh that carried even in their darkest days. He was the kind of soldier others wanted to follow, not because he barked orders or demanded respect, but because he carried himself with a quiet certainty. He believed people mattered, even when the world insisted otherwise. She remembered the way he used to fix the strap on her training rifle when it slipped from her shoulder, his hand steady, his voice teasing but patient. "Up here," he'd say, tugging it higher. "You keep it too loose, you'll lose your balance, and out there balance is everything." She remembered the night he left for his last mission. Rain hammered the windows, the streets glistened with mud, and their mother had begged him not to go. But Elias only smiled, kissed her forehead, and promised he'd be back before sunrise. He never returned. The report came weeks later, official, clinical, detached. Unit ambushed, hostiles disguised as civilians. Elias delayed his shot. The hesitation cost them the mission. Fatalities confirmed. The words felt like a blade driven into her chest. The Elias she knew, the brother she trusted, would never have frozen, would never have hesitated. And yet the report was clear. His mercy, his pause, had sealed his fate. From that moment, hesitation became her enemy. She vowed never to repeat his mistake, never to falter, never to let mercy carve her open. And yet, every time her finger tightened on the trigger, his face haunted her. The last smile he gave her, the last words he wrote, the letter she read until the ink blurred. "Don't let this war take you too." But wasn't it already too late? The days after the rescue blurred together. The squad moved like ghosts, exhaustion etched deep in their bones, silence stretching between them like an invisible thread. They had saved lives, yes, but the cost lingered, invisible yet heavy. Ortiz hid his nerves behind jokes, but his laugh cracked too easily. Chen muttered prayers longer than before, clutching his medallion as if it were oxygen. Malik grew sharper, more rigid, his eyes carrying the weight of every choice, every risk, every life balanced on a blade's edge. And she buried herself in routine, cleaning her rifle, adjusting her gear, counting her ammunition twice over as though numbers could keep the ghosts at bay. But no amount of ritual could silence the storm inside. Because every time she closed her eyes, she saw Elias in that boy's face, the boy they'd rescued from the compound. His wide eyes, his trembling hands, his desperate clinging to life. She saw Elias not as the soldier in the report, but as the brother who had laughed, who had believed in her, who had asked her not to lose herself. She was losing him twice, once to death and once to memory. Orders came again. This time the mission wasn't rescue, it wasn't defense, it was assault. High-value target, strategic elimination. No room for negotiation. No room for hesitation. The kind of mission Elias would have questioned, the kind she couldn't afford to. The briefing room felt colder than usual. Malik's voice was clipped, professional, his questions short and calculated. Ortiz shifted in his seat, tapping his pen against his knee. Chen's lips moved silently, prayer spilling under his breath. She sat in the corner, her rifle case by her feet, the mission file open in front of her. The target's face stared up at her, blurred photo, intelligent sketch. Another name in the endless cycle of war. Malik's voice cut through the silence. This is surgical. We go in, we cut the head, we leave. No complications. But there were always complications. Her eyes lingered on the target's face. He wasn't older than Elias had been, maybe younger. The thought twisted something in her chest. Later in the barracks, Ortiz broke the silence. You ever think about what they were before this? The targets, I mean. Before the war turned them into whatever they are now. Chen shot him a look. They made their choice. Yeah, but Ortiz hesitated, words faltering. What if someone said the same about us? What if we're just on the other side of someone else's orders? The room fell quiet. Malik didn't answer. Chen didn't either. And she wanted to scream at Ortiz to shut up, to stop tugging at the threads already fraying inside her. But she couldn't, because she had thought the same. Night fell. The squad moved under cover of darkness, shadows blending with shadows, weapons silent and ready. The compound loomed ahead, smaller than the last but no less dangerous. She took her position, rifle steady, scope aligned. Breath slow, heartbeat measured. The crosshairs rested over a window where movement flickered. And then he stepped into view. The target. Her finger hovered on the trigger. One pull and it would be over. One pull and the mission would succeed. One pull and she would not repeat Elias' mistake. But in that frozen moment, her chest tightened. The face in her scope blurred, shifting, twisting, until it wasn't the target anymore. It was Elias. Smiling. Alive. Looking at her as though she was the one who needed saving. Her breath caught, her hands trembled. Take the shot, Malik's voice cut through her calms, sharp, commanding. Her finger froze, her pulse thundered in her ears. Elias' letter echoed in her head. Don't let this war take you too. Sniper, do you copy? Take the shot, Malik barked. Her vision swam. She saw Elias' face, then the target, then Elias again. The line blurred, the world spun. And then gunfire exploded from below. The squad was compromised. Her hesitation had cost them the element of surprise. Chaos erupted. Bullets tore through the night. Shouts echoed, sharp and panicked. Ortiz cursed over comms, Chen cried out for cover, Malik's orders roared through static. She forced herself to fire, but the shot went wide. Too late, too loud. The enemy was awake now, alive, swarming like hornets. And in the chaos she knew she had become Elias. The hesitation was hers. The failure was hers. And if the squad didn't make it out alive, their deaths would be hers too. That night, as the firefight dragged into the small hours, as smoke and blood thickened the air, she felt the promise she made to her brother shatter. She had sworn never to hesitate. She had sworn never to falter. And yet, in the moment that mattered most, she had. And the war had taken her, just as it had taken him. What happens when the one meant to protect is the one who falters? The question gnawed at her in the seconds after the firefight. Bullets snapped past her perch, biting into stone, shattering glass, cracking walls into dust. She barely registered Malik's shouts, Ortiz's frantic breath over comms, Chen's clipped curses as he dragged someone to cover. She had missed the moment to end it before it began, and now everyone was paying for it. The compound lit up like a hive disturbed. Enemy fire poured from windows and rooftops. Shadows swarmed the narrow alleys. The quiet surgical strike had turned into a storm. From her scope she tried to salvage what she could. One shot down, another missed. Her hands shook. Sweat blurred her vision. The target had disappeared from sight. Where? The sniper support. Malik's voice cut like a blade, raw with fury. She opened her mouth, but words tangled in her throat. She fired again, the recoil slamming into her shoulder, but the shot went wide. Damn it, Ortiz's cry over comms. A spray of gunfire forced him into cover. Her pulse raced. She had to reset, had to breathe. Elia's face still lingered in the scope, haunting, blurring the target. She blinked hard, but it was too late. The hesitation had already unraveled everything. Minutes stretched into hours, or maybe it just felt that way. By the time the firefight ebbed, when the last echoes of gunfire faded into night, the squad was battered, breathless, and bloodied. Ortiz had taken a graze across the shoulder. Chen's leg was cut deep from shrapnel. Malik moved slower, his left arm stiff where a bullet had grazed close enough to burn. They were alive, but barely. The extraction point wasn't safe anymore. They had to move, dragging their wounded, hiding in shadows, ducking when searchlights swept too close. Each step echoed her failure louder. Because this wasn't victory, this wasn't even survival, this was escape. Hours later, under the shelter of a half-collapsed building miles away, they finally stopped. The squad huddled in the dark, whispering, patching wounds with torn fabric and clenched teeth. The stench of gunpowder still clung to them. No one spoke to her. Malik worked in silence, his jaw set like granite as he tightened a tourniquet on Chen's leg. Ortiz tried to joke through the pain, but his laughter was thin, hollow, forced. She sat apart, rifle across her knees, staring at the cracked floor. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. The silence pressed in until Ortiz broke it. His voice was soft, hesitant. What happened up there? No one looked at her, not at first, but the weight of the question lingered, demanding an answer. She forced herself to meet their eyes. Malik's stare was sharp, cutting. Chen's gaze was wary, disappointed. Ortiz, his was the worst, not angry, just confused. She opened her mouth, but the truth felt heavy. How could she explain Elia's face in the scope? How could she tell them she froze, that mercy and memory had tangled her hands? Malik finally spoke, his voice low, each word deliberate. You had one job, one shot. We needed you. She swallowed hard. But no words came. Do you know what that cost us? He snapped, his composure cracking for the first time. We barely made it out alive. Chen can't walk without help. Ortiz could have bled out. And the target, he's still out there, all because you hesitated. His words cut deeper than any bullet. She wanted to argue, to defend herself, to explain the ghost that had stolen her finger from the trigger, but the words tangled in shame. She had no defense. Malik exhaled sharply, shaking his head. You can't afford that luxury, not here, not now. Silence followed, the kind that suffocated. Ortiz finally looked at her, his voice almost a whisper. You froze, didn't you? Her throat tightened, she didn't answer. That silence was enough. The squad drifted into uneasy sleep. She couldn't. She sat awake, staring into the dark, listening to their shallow breaths. Every sound of the night, the rustle of leaves, the crack of distant gunfire, the cry of some animal in the ruins, felt louder, sharper, almost accusatory. And inside, the voice she couldn't escape whispered again, Elia's voice. Don't let this war take you too. But wasn't it already too late? Dawn broke slow, gray, and heavy. The squad moved cautiously, exhaustion dragging at every step. Malik set the pace, eyes hard, scanning every corner, every shadow. They didn't speak to her, not directly. Orders came short, clipped, a nod instead of words. She felt the distance growing, like a wall rising between her and the only people she had left. The mission wasn't over. The target was still alive, and Malik made it clear this time there would be no room for mistakes. They reached a ridge overlooking the valley where the target had retreated. Through her scope, she saw movement, guards posted, patrols weaving, the compound fortified again. Her hands clenched around the rifle, the crosshairs steadied. But in her mind, Elia's face lingered, always Elia's. This time she told herself she wouldn't falter, she couldn't. Yet the doubt gnawed. What if mercy wasn't weakness? What if Elia's hadn't been wrong to hesitate? What if she was wrong now, chasing a promise born out of grief instead of truth? Malik crouched beside her, his voice low but sharp. Listen to me, I don't care what's in your head. Out here, hesitation kills. You get one chance. One, you miss again, we all die. She nodded, though her chest tightened. Because he was right. And yet, Elia's ghost still lingered. The plan was set. Ortiz and Chen would flank from the left, laying charges. Malik would breach the south wall. She would take the overwatch, the shot that opened the door. The squad moved, shadows in daylight slipping into place. She lay prone, scope steady, breath measured. The target stepped into view. Her finger rested on the trigger. Her pulse slowed. Her breath held. No Elias, not this time. Just the target. And yet, as she stared, she saw something else. Not a ghost, not her brother. A child standing in the background, watching. Her chest froze, her scope wavered. The shot wasn't clean anymore. Take it, Malik hissed in her ear. She swallowed hard. If she fired, the child would see everything. The blood, the body, another life scarred, another ghost born. If she hesitated, the squad might not make it out alive. The war demanded a choice. But either way, the weight would be hers to carry. What does it take to pull the trigger when a child is watching? The question dug its claws into her chest, sharp, unrelenting. Her finger trembled against the trigger guard. Through her scope, the scene refused to blur. The target framed perfectly in her crosshairs, and just beyond him, a small face, wide-eyed, uncomprehending, frozen in the kind of silence that only comes when innocence is forced to witness violence. Her breath stilled, time slowed. Take it, Malik's voice hissed again in her ear, clipped with urgency, with the kind of rage that came not from anger but from fear. The squad was in position. They were waiting on her. One pull and the mission would ignite. One hesitation and it could collapse. But in that frozen second, she wasn't in the valley anymore. She was back in her mother's kitchen. Elias was beside her, laughing as he stirred the soup, teasing her for cutting the bread too thick. The smell of garlic and oil filled the air. Outside, rain tapped against the glass. Elias had turned to her then, smiling with that same warmth that made her forget the war even existed, and said, "Whatever happens to me out there, don't let it turn you into someone you're not." Her throat closed. The child's eyes locked with hers through the scope. She could swear he saw her, that he felt her hesitation bleeding across the distance. "Sniper," Malik's bark snapped her back. "Now." Her finger squeezed. But not at the target. She fired high, shattering a floodlight above the compound. The valley exploded into chaos. Guards scrambled, blinded, shouting. Malik cursed in her comms, the kind of curse that wasn't just anger but disbelief. Ortiz and Chen detonated their charges early, blasting a hole in the side wall. The squad surged forward, forced into improvisation. And she fired again, not at the target but at his guards, thinning their numbers, covering her team's advance. It wasn't clean, it wasn't precise, it wasn't the mission. But it kept the child from watching someone die. Minutes blurred into blood and smoke. The compound roared with gunfire, shouts, and the ringing of metal torn apart by explosions. Malik's voice cut through the static, issuing sharp, furious commands. Ortiz yelled over the crackle of rounds. Chen's voice strained as he dragged himself, wounded but unyielding. She kept firing, but every shot carried a weight. Every miss, every hit, every scream below pressed harder into her chest. The target was still alive, slipping deeper into the compound's maze. And she knew Malik would never forgive her for letting him slip. When the dust finally settled, the squad regrouped at the extraction point, breathless, wounded, bloodied, alive but hollow. Malik's glare found her instantly. His jaw was clenched, eyes like sharpened steel. What the hell was that? His voice was low, dangerous. She lowered her rifle, but her hands didn't stop trembling. There was a child. A child, Malik spat, stepping closer. You had the shot, you had the mission, and you threw it away because of a child. His words cut, each one sharper than the last. Chen shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Ortiz looked down, his silence heavier than any judgment. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to meet Malik's stare. I wasn't going to make him watch. You think that boy hasn't seen worse already? Malik snapped, his voice rising. You think sparing him this one moment changes what this war is? We don't get to choose when innocence breaks. It's already broken. The silence that followed was suffocating. She wanted to scream back, to tell him he was wrong, to tell him Elias had died because he had believed in mercy, and she wasn't willing to kill what was left of herself for another mission. But the words lodged in her throat. Malik exhaled harsh and turned away. You compromised the mission. The target's still alive. That's on you. He walked off, his back rigid with fury. Ortiz followed slowly, avoiding her eyes. Chen lingered for a moment, his gaze softer, searching her face. He didn't speak, but in the way he looked at her, she thought she saw something that wasn't condemnation. Maybe pity, maybe understanding, maybe both. Then he too turned away. And she was alone again. The helicopter ride back was silent. Engines roared, rotors thundered, but inside not a word passed. Malik sat stone still, arms crossed, staring at the floor. Ortiz leaned back, headphones in, but no music played. Chen's eyes were closed, lips moving in prayer. She stared out the open door, the wind whipping against her face, the world below stretching endless and unforgiving. Villages scarred by fire, roads shattered by bombs, rivers clogged with wreckage. She thought of the boy's eyes, wide, unblinking, fragile. She thought of Elias. She thought of Malik's words. We don't get to choose when innocence breaks. But wasn't that the only thing left to fight for? Back at base, the debrief was short, brutal. Mission failed. Target alive. Casualties, none this time. The commander's disappointment was cold, clinical. Malik bore the weight of it, but she saw the way his eyes flicked toward her, silent accusation. When it ended, the squad dispersed without a word. Malik stormed off, shoulders rigid. Ortiz lingered near the lockers, rubbing his bandaged shoulder but didn't speak. Chen passed her quietly, offering only a faint nod. And she stayed behind, alone again, staring at the empty chairs, the silent table. The ghosts pressed in tighter than ever. Elias, the boy, the target still alive, Malik's fury, her own failure. She pressed her hands to her face, her breath shuddering. For the first time in years, she felt tears burn her eyes. That night she sat outside the hangar, alone under the stars. The air was cool, still, heavy with the scent of oil and dust. The base hummed faintly in the distance, generators, distant laughter, the occasional bark of an order, but around her silence. She looked up, searching the sky, not for constellations, for Elias. Was I wrong? She whispered, her voice breaking. Would you have taken the shot? Would you have killed him, even with the boy there? Or would you have spared him too, like I did? No answer, just wind, just silence. But deep inside, she thought she heard his voice. Not words, not clear, just a memory, an echo. His laugh, his warmth. The way he made her believe that war couldn't take everything, even when it took him. She pressed her forehead against the cold steel of her rifle. I don't know who I am anymore, she whispered. And for the first time, she wasn't sure if she wanted the answer. The next morning, Malik avoided her. Orders came through him, but not to her. He spoke to Ortiz, to Chen, to the commander, but when his eyes passed over her, they were empty, as though she wasn't there at all. She wanted to fight back, to defend herself, to remind him that they were alive because of her cover fire. That maybe, just maybe, the mission wasn't worth the cost of turning a child into another ghost. But she didn't, because deep down she knew Malik was right too. The target was still alive. The war wasn't finished, and her hesitation had nearly cost them everything. That night she dreamed. She dreamed of Elias standing at the compound's window, staring at her through the scope. But when she pulled the trigger, it wasn't him who fell. It was herself. She woke breathless, trembling, her throat raw as though she'd been screaming. The war was closing in. The squad was fracturing. And she was caught in the center, torn between mercy and mission, between Elias' ghost and Malik's fury, between who she was and who the war demanded she become. Somewhere in the distance, alarms blared, boots thundered against concrete, shouts pierced the night. Another mission, another fire waiting to consume them. She rose slowly, strapping her gear tight, wiping the sweat from her brow. Her reflection in the cracked mirror stared back, eyes hollow, skin drawn, jaw clenched. Her silhouette stood against the fire again. A lone figure, carrying the weight of destiny. But for how much longer could she carry it? She didn't feel the heat of the flames anymore, or maybe she had grown numb to it. The air was thick, heavy with smoke, every breath scraping her throat raw, but her eyes stayed fixed on the horizon. Beyond the jagged ruins, beyond the collapsing roofs and shattered streets, there was someone waiting for her. The comms were quiet now, too quiet. She couldn't even tell if her team was alive, if their voices had been swallowed by interference or by silence of another kind. For the first time in weeks, there was no directive in her ear, no barked order guiding her every step. Only the echo of her own heartbeat, steady, stubborn, refusing to surrender. And yet the weight pressed in. The mission was nearly complete. The charges had detonated. The supply line was broken. But victory wasn't what she felt. No, what she felt was the kind of emptiness you can't put into words, the kind that makes you wonder if survival is even worth the price. She adjusted her rifle strap, the familiar weight against her shoulder grounding her. She thought of her mother's letters, creased from being read too many times. Her mother never wrote about pride. She never wrote about fear. She always asked the same thing. When will you come home? That word, home, it felt distant now, almost fictional. A place she carried in memory, not in geography. Behind her, a low groan echoed. She turned sharply, a survivor. Not one of her own, but a child no older than 12, coughing in the smoke, their eyes wide with the kind of terror that ages you overnight. She hesitated. She had no orders for this. No plan accounted for carrying another weight through fire. And yet, she couldn't walk away. Her boots crunched over shattered glass as she moved closer. The child flinched at her silhouette, as if unsure if she was savior or executioner. She lowered her weapon slowly, letting her voice break through the static of the flames. "It's all right, you're not alone." The words surprised even her. When had she last believed them for herself? The child's small hand clutched hers, fragile but desperate, and together they moved through the chaos. Every step was harder. Her lungs burned, her legs shook, but she forced herself onward. Not for duty, not for the mission, for this one life, because saving one mattered as much as breaking the enemy's hold, maybe more. When the smoke cleared enough to see the dawn breaking, she paused. Light spilled across the broken city, soft and merciless all at once. The child stared at it as if the sun itself was proof that survival was possible. And in that moment she felt it, the truth that had been hidden beneath orders, beneath sacrifice, beneath loss. War strips away illusions, but it also reveals what endures. Not medals, not glory, not even victory. What endures are the choices, the ones that ask nothing of history but everything of the heart. Her comms crackled weakly to life then, a voice hoarse, strained. "Echo 3, do you copy?" Her throat tightened. They were alive, at least some of them. She looked down at the child beside her, their eyes searching hers. She gave the faintest nod. "I copy," she whispered back into the mic. The war wasn't over. Not yet. But in this fleeting quiet standing between destruction and dawn, she realized something. She could carry the weight of destiny not because it was given to her, not because she was told to, but because she chose to. And sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. She lifted her gaze to the horizon, the child's hand still wrapped in hers, and together they walked into the morning. Silence followed, a silence that spoke louder than any victory ever could.